All right, Bob, you can go ahead.
Sure. Welcome all, and thank you for attending our first annual chapter town hall. I'm Bob Doran and have served on the Upstate New York Chapter Board of Directors for over 5 years, the last 2 of them as president of the board. In addition, I've served on the National Association Governance and Strategic Planning Committees, as well as engaged in advocacy on the national and state levels. I came to the Als Association because I was the primary caregiver for my wife who had this disease for 11 years and passed away in 2017. Now I'd like to introduce Liz Crisonda, Executive Director of the Upstate New York Chapter. Liz?
Sorry about that. Thanks, Bob. It is my privilege to serve as the Executive Director of the Upstate New York Chapter. We have relied on the care and support of all of you to provide help and hope to people living with ALS and their families. I am blown away every day by those of you who give selflessly of yourself to ensure that the best care is available to our pals and their families who live with the challenges of ALS every day. Our mission: to create a world without ALS. All of us want to rid the world of this awful disease because we have seen and felt the devastation it causes. And although we are not there yet, we have made great strides in advocacy and research and patient care. This past year, our efforts have helped increase dedicated research funding through the Department of Defense ALS Research Program from $20 to $40 million. And the National Institutes of Health has dedicated an additional $25 million to speed up ALS research in a new program called ALS2. Notably, our persistence resulted in the 5-month waiting period for SSDI being waived for ALS patients, allowing them immediate access to benefits. Over the past few years, the Upstate New York chapter has tripled our staff, we have doubled our budget, and we have added respite and quality of life grants to help meet the unmet needs of our families. About 80% of the money that we raise each year is invested in direct programs and services to support the 400 families that we serve. There's no need to be reminded about the challenges that we've collectively faced this past year, but together we overcame a great deal. We've learned a lot of lessons, and we continue to assess how we can better serve and support our pals and their families. We are confident that we will continue to grow, to be creative, and to help our families engage with the world how they want and to live their best lives. Over the next hour, we will be reviewing developments in both global ALS research and what is happening here in our own backyard at the ALS Certified Treatment Center of Excellence at Upstate Medical University. We will also update you on how we've responded to the COVID-19 pandemic and how we plan to grow. Because as we all know, ALS didn't stop and neither did we. So a few housekeeping notes. Today's program is being recorded. The chat function is live and will be monitored, so let us know if you're having any technical challenges. And if you have a question for our panelists, please use the Q&A function at the bottom right of your screen. We hope you can settle in for the next 45 minutes or so and enjoy what we are excited to share with you. Now, let me introduce our panel. First, we have Dr. Jill Yersak. Jill joined the ALS Association in October 2015 and is Vice President of Mission Strategy. In this role, she supports the coordination and integration of mission activity that spans care services, research, and advocacy. She leads mission programs, including the ALS Roundtable Program and the ALS Focus Survey Program. Dr. Yersak received her PhD in molecular cell biology at Thomas Jefferson University in Philadelphia with a focus on neurodegenerative diseases. She completed her postdoctoral fellowship in neuroscience at Brown University, where she focused on ALS research. Next, let me introduce Dr. Euphrosyne Young. Dr. Young is an assistant professor of neurology at SUNY Upstate. She is the director of the Als Association Certified Treatment Center of Excellence at Upstate Medical University. She has been director of intraoperative monitoring at SUNY Upstate since 2015. Dr. Young started offering home spirometry for ALS patients during the COVID-19 pandemic and is currently the primary investigator for 2 site clinical trials validating the use of home spirometry. She completed her medical degree at the University of the East and completed her neurology and clinical neurophysiology training at North Shore University Hospital and SUNY Buffalo. She serves on the Bulbar Committee of the Northeast ALS Consortium, and her research interests also include transcranial magnetic stimulation in ALS. Lastly, for those of you who don't already know her, let me introduce Rebecca Coulter. Rebecca is the Care Services Manager for the entire Upstate New York chapter. A licensed clinical social worker, Rebecca has been with us for nearly 10 years. In addition to serving PALS in the CNY region, she supervises our care services staff and is critical in evaluating, refining, and developing our care services programs. Her skill, compassion, and dedication are legendary, and she will update you on our programs and services. So, without further ado, let me introduce Dr. Jill Yursak. Jill?
Hi, guys. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Bob. Always love working with your chapter. I'm happy to be here today. Hope that someday we can be together in person. It's been a rough year and a half or so, but definitely light at the end of the tunnel. So thanks again. So while you get the presentation up. So today I'm going to give you a quick overview of our research program and tell you some really interesting and exciting things that are happening in the field. So the Als Association is the largest philanthropic ALS funder in the world. Right now, we've funded over $110 million since the Ice Bucket Challenge. And, you know, this is something so important that we as an organization not only fund research, but we have care service and advocacy. So we have a 3-pronged approach, and we're the only ALS organization that does that. And so that's something that we need to talk about more and be really proud of. And but today I'm really going to focus on the research program. And when you think about when we fund research, we don't fund just basic research, but we fund infrastructure, we fund people, we fund the places, and all the reagents and equipment people need to actually get their work done. So, and I'll give you a little bit more of an overview of that. And what we love to do, and where our role is in this really big pool of money of research, is that we help leverage research dollars for researchers. So when a researcher gets one of our grants, the goal is to get more data and more positive data that they can show bigger funders like the National Institutes of Health to get even more funding. So we've been able to, and we've had great success over the years, leveraging our smaller grants into really large NIH grants, and that helps researchers really move along the research in the most quick way. So next slide, please. So this is our research program. As you can see, it's multifaceted. We fund everything from very early research on the left all the way to phase 2 clinical trials. We don't fund phase 3 clinical trials because they're really expensive, and if we funded phase 3 trials, we wouldn't have money to fund anything else, frankly. So what's interesting and what's important is that all our advocacy that we'll be doing next month at our advocacy day, which I hope everyone can come to, we advocate for research dollars, not only for our research program, but from the government. So we advocate for research dollars from the NIH to fund a lot of the basic research science that we also fund, and also for drug development and phase 1 studies to the Department of Defense. And so we work in concert with both the NIH and the DoD, the ALS research program at the Department of Defense, to really coexist and figure out how we can work together to fund the best research projects all over the world. And when we fund research, we don't decide all that on our own. Our chief scientist, Dr. Dave, is amazing. He brings together research experts from all over the world to help us really review all the research grants we get in. And we fund based on our budget and the best and the brightest in the world. So it's not Dr. Dave making those decisions, but it's a group of experts that we collectively work together to make those decisions. And so right now we fund over 166 active projects in 13 countries and have a $55 million research commitment. And as you can imagine, those numbers are constantly changing because grants start and end. And we are looking forward to, we actually have a couple of research applications out right now that we're reviewing, and we're hoping to make those announcements in the fall. But as you can see, we do fund across the research pipeline, and then that infrastructure that I talked about in the beginning. And then also managing ALS are things that can help people now. So assistive technology, telehealth, caregiver care, those types of things are really important that can make an impact on people's lives immediately versus a research project in the lab, which takes years to get into clinical trials. Next slide. So this is our clinical trial landscape. Right now, we have over 100 clinical trials, which are interventional, meaning testing an actual drug, or observational, which is watching a person over time as the disease progresses, or a biomarker study understanding which a biomarker is something in your body that you can see change over time as your disease progresses. And that could be like a molecular or cellular change that you can see in your blood, your cerebral spinal fluid, or even in your urine. So as you can see, we have a robust pipeline. This is just a sampling in phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. And everything we asterisked on this slide are things that we have funded as an ALS organization over the years, either currently or in the past. So we are really excited about this pipeline. I think, you know, I've been in the ALS field for over 10 years. This is the most robust research pipeline I've seen in a really long time, and I have a lot of hope that a lot of these drugs can get far. And so you're always looking at the phase 3 trials, which I will give in more information as we move along. Next slide. The first study that I want to talk about and give more information on is the Amylyx study. So Amylyx is a pharmaceutical company that is out of Cambridge, started by two young men who actually went to Brennan University and started the research project there, which is really amazing. I've worked with them for years. They're really great company that we're always happy to work with. And so this is this trial they gave top line results of recently. This was a multi-centered trial, placebo-controlled, that was done over. It's been going on since for at least a couple of years for it to end. We're excited to hear that it just demonstrated a significant delay in disease progression as measured by the ALS-FRS scale. And it had demonstrated good safety profile, and it was generally well tolerated. There was some, the main issue with this drug was some GI issues, but those are transient and resolved usually within a few weeks. So everyone who was on the trial, who stayed in the trial, was eligible to then move over to an open label extension study, which is still ongoing. So if you're either on the drug or placebo, you would then move on to drug or continue on the drug if you're originally on the drug, which is something we're really happy to hear and that they're able to do. And importantly, they also released that this drug demonstrated a 6.5-month increase in survival in participants originally randomized to drug versus those originally randomized to placebo. So this is so this study was even post the actual trial. They continue this survival study longer. So this is something really exciting. And this 6.5-month survival was something I've never seen before in an ALS trial. So next up, the company plans to submit a marketing application to Health Canada very, very soon, and then intends to submit a marketing application to the EMA by the end of 2021. We're still working with the FDA here in the United States about what's going to happen here, and the association will update the community as we hear more what's going to be happening in the United States. Next slide. The other exciting trial I want to talk to you about is our platform trial. And this is the slide that I got from our colleague, Dr. Jinsey Andrews from Columbia, and she's one of the centers down in New York City. And what's cool about this trial is that a person is less likely to be on placebo, and so you are able to run multiple drugs on one with one pool of placebo, so you're less likely to be randomized to placebo. So how it works is if you get enrolled in the trial, you're randomized either to therapy A, B, or C, and once you're randomized into one of the therapies, you're then randomized either a 3-to-1 to placebo to active drug. And so this is, and this placebo pool is shared between all three therapies. So this is really exciting. We've funded this trial, been working with the Healy people for years, even before we announced this. We've given over $3 million to this trial. Our chief scientist is on the scientific committee, and we also have other colleagues in other committees in the Healy trial. So right now we have these are the 4 drugs that are in the trial right now. On the right, I know they're working on to add a 5th one in the near future. And they've been doing really good with enrollment. As of March, they've had 50% enrollment in the first 3 drugs already. So they're moving, and we're hoping to see some top-line results from them next year, and from their multiple sites that they've been enrolling across the country. Next slide. So this is another quick update on some other trials. I'll start with the bad news first. Early this month, we had news out of Orphazyme that their phase 3 trial for arimoclomol did not meet its primary and secondary endpoints. And it also did not have any safety concerns, but the company felt that since it didn't meet its primary and secondary endpoints, it can no longer, the trial's going to end, and they're going to continue to, they're going to publish results. And even though the trial was negative, you can still learn from the trial, and their data can be shared with other trials so they can learn how to improve in the future. The second one is Doran. We have, early this year, they in a press release, talked about some unpublished results from their phase 3 trial that they did not meet statistical significance in their primary and secondary endpoints. And the FDA, based on those results, concluded that the data did not provide substantial evidence to apply for a new drug application, and recommended collecting additional data. And so the brainstorm continues to analyze clinical and biomarker data. We're still waiting to see these results. They've not been published, and we're still waiting to see and for them to release the results about who was in placebo and who was in the experimental group. So there's a lot to be learned from this study yet. So we're still in kind of a waiting pattern with them, unfortunately. And then lastly, this is more of a positive update. It's Biogen has a gene therapy called tofersen that targets ALS, that specifically targets the SOD1 gene mutation. So someone who has ALS in their family. And what's cool about this drug and important to know is if you have this SOD1 gene, since they have a target, this gene therapy actually prevents the bad protein that causes damages in your motor neurons from even existing in the first place. It actually gets rid of it in your cell before it makes protein. And so I think there is a lot of potential with this drug to slow disease progression and maybe even stop it. And so Biogen has completed enrollment and has top line results hopefully by the end of this year. So we're hoping to hear some good things. And I'm confident about this drug. I hope, if this drug does come to market, this could open the floodgates for other gene therapies that are in the pipeline to target other ALS genes that we know, which are about at least 30 ALS genes. Next slide. And so yesterday, we had a meeting with the FDA called We Can't Wait Action Meeting. We are really excited to have this meeting. People with ALS and their families were talking about why they're more likely to take a risk in experimental therapy versus other people, and how FDA may define something as unsubstantial change in your disease progression, but actually, in reality, for a person with ALS and their family, it is a big difference and a big change. So a difference, for example, from feeding yourself to feeding yourself versus having someone feed you, or using your walker versus being able to, or being in a wheelchair. So these small changes in ALS-FRS scores or changes in disease progression do really make a big impact in your family. So I encourage you to check out this video on this link below, and to submit your stories about why you think experimental therapies could benefit you. Next slide. I also like to add the next two things I want to talk about, also things to do. And so I always like to give you action items. There are other action items to ask. And a question I was asked is, how do you search for clinical trials in your area? And so we've been partnering with the Northeast ALS Consortium for a really long time, almost 15 years. And they have a really great clinical trial finder. And so what you go is you click on this link that I gave you here, and you do an advanced search. So what you would do is you'd click enrolling, and then you click on your state, which is New York, and then you would click interventional trial, meaning a trial that is a drug. It's testing a drug, and that will give you a list of drugs in your area of what is enrolling, and then it gives you information of who to contact. And if you have any questions, and no question's stupid, please, like every question's good. We help fund and support our clinical trial liaison. Her name is Carly, and she's phenomenal. We've been working with her for years, and so here's her number and email address. So if you have any questions about clinical trials, please contact Carly, and she's more than happy to help you. Next slide. And I also want to emphasize, I talked a lot about trials today, but most people with ALS are not eligible to be in a clinical trial. But there's still opportunities to be involved in research, like for example, ALS Focus. And this is a program we run at the Als Association to really bring the perspectives of patients and caregivers to the forefront of advocacy care and research. So what we're asking about is your experiences along the disease journey. What causes you burden? How can we help different areas of your life to make things better? So we've asked you questions in previous surveys around insurance needs and financial burden, caregiver burden, what matters most to you as far as what your symptoms are. And we've been publishing these results on this website below. So I encourage you to look at those, of these results that we've been able to publish online. And what's very cool and really important to know is that we share all these results with researchers all over the world for free. We don't sell your data, and we're able to, all your de-identified data is safe and captured in a way that we can then share with researchers to do deeper dives into this really great information to help with better understand caregiver and patient burden. And really, it's all about the data. You need data to make change. The FDA doesn't care about anecdotal as much as about anecdotal experiences, whereas if you have data to show that there's a burden, they're going to pay more attention. And so I encourage you to sign up and learn more at, again, the below address. And our next survey is actually coming out in a couple days around experiences around telehealth. And we picked that because there's been a lot of great information going on, and a switch to more telehealth during the COVID-19 pandemic. So I'm going to stop there. I'm happy to take questions at the end, but Liz and Bob and everyone from Upstate New York chapter, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Jill. That was a great overview of the Global Research Program. I always learn more and more every time I hear you speak. So again, we really appreciate you. As you can see, the ALS Association is really committed in moving the needle, to develop new effective treatments and to making them accessible as soon as possible, and really extending the state-of-the-art care for every American with ALS. Now, here in Syracuse, Dr. Young responded to the urgency underscored by the COVID-19 pandemic to address one of the issues inherent in telehealth unique to ALS patients, which is the need to monitor vital breathing capacity. Along with her partners Tackle ALS and MT Pharma, she has been studying the use of home spirometry as a very important tool in maximizing the quality of life for the ALS community. So Dr. Young, take it away.
Thank you, Liz. First of all, I really feel honored to be in this program this afternoon. I have really felt, based on my experience with the ALS Association, with Liz Crisonda and Rebecca Coulter that we are part of the ALS community, and along with our partners, we are boots on the ground. And I just love that phrase, boots on the ground, because it shows everyone how close the relationship is and how unified the goals are. That's how I'd like to start my segment. I did want to add that SUNY Upstate is activated as a site for the Combat Butylas trial, as well as the Healy ALS platform trial. We are looking at the next quarter to participate in 2 other ALS drug trials. And this is in keeping with our goal to make trial participation accessible to our patients in the Syracuse area. So where do I begin? So a year ago, we had all transitioned to telemedicine, staff, colleagues, patients. It seemed like it happened overnight and too good to be true, almost. But soon enough, a year ago in May, we realized that probably we should be taking a long, hard look at what our new normal is. So normal before the pandemic was that we would obtain pulmonary function testing every 3 months in clinic. And we knew at the time that that was a snapshot of patients' lung function. And there are patients that require more close ongoing surveillance of their pulmonary function. Maybe not everyone, but at some point, patients do progress and require closer follow-up. So a year ago, 2 months into the pandemic, we looked at our workflow and our services and tried to see, are our patients truly doing well being seen through telemedicine? And we soon realized that for a good number of our patients, they did require more close ongoing surveillance, as opposed to seeing them on the screen or maybe doing a cursory motor exam by having them lift their arms up or having them walk. There are many challenges, as you know, with telemedicine. So we quickly tried to see what was in our database, what was in other clinic database, what's published, what's peer-reviewed, and come to find that there has been some work in the field of home spirometry, although not a lot, and certainly not enough to implement it on a bigger scale. So I think what you see on the screen is the pilot study that we did at SUNY Upstate. We were able to engage the Upstate Foundation and Tim Green Tackle Fund, and we were able to hand out basically portable spirometers to our patients in order to monitor from home since July of 2020. And what's shown on that picture is my colleague, Dr. Meyer, who we had her pose, and I am using a portable spirometer, and a respiratory therapist is also on the screen providing the coaching, so that throughout the duration of testing, which requires, a couple of minutes, maybe a little bit longer, depending on the use of the device, for a respiratory therapist to coach and be able to monitor the patients from home. So this was our answer to the pandemic. And it certainly, looking back, I do feel that it was an answer to a great need. It was quick. We quickly realized that the patients required more close monitoring. The quality of the measurement, however, needed to be looked at in greater detail. So we have conventional spirometers and we have portable spirometers. But in the field of ALS, we don't actually know which portable spirometer would be most accurate, and how this should all be implemented on a scale that would allow for us to determine if, number one, it is truly accurate, and number two, does it contribute to patients' care and therapy. So we realized, after monitoring a little over 30 patients from home, that this year we needed to look into the frequency of our monitoring. If we look at our colleagues, our pulmonary colleagues, they have studies done in COPD, for example, wherein they do home monitoring, and they do it at a frequency of maybe daily or weekly. And they've studied over 2,500 patients to try to see which patient would be able to wean off of steroids in a safe manner. So we know that in other disease processes, whether it be cystic fibrosis in kids, pulmonary fibrosis in adults, and COPD, you know, they have acquired the use of home spirometry in order to determine the effect of various treatments, as well as withdrawal of treatment. So in ALS, I think that there is definitely a role and potentially a huge impact. Dr. Yursak talked about phase 2 trials. You know, the impact of home spirometry and the ability to obtain more data that is based on pulmonary function testing, as opposed to data based on ALS functional rating scale, is tremendous. So the potential for improving therapeutic interventions in a more timely manner, monitoring from home every 2 weeks, is what we aim to do. So this year, in collaboration with Atrium Health in North Carolina, and the guidance of our consultant, Dr. Benjamin Brooks, SUNY Upstate was able to acquire a sponsorship. So this is an investigator-initiated trial looking at the use of home spirometry, accuracy, as well as effect on therapeutic intervention by home monitoring every 2 weeks for a period of 6 months. So I think that in terms of clinical outcomes, this would definitely be a huge improvement. And in terms of impact on how clinical trials are conducted, this is an investment in the economic impact of such an outcome measure. With that, I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to share our investment in you, in the ALS patient, ALS population, which we certainly feel to be our true goal. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Young. I have to tell you, I'm just as honored to partner with you and your team at Upstate. I can't tell you actually how reassuring it is for me to know that you are only a phone call away. If we have anything we need, or if we have a question, or to help us out, whether it's in terms of programs or in specific with a patient who might be reaching out directly to us. So, and I want to, you didn't say it, but I do want to say that there are only 2 sites in New York State that are part of the platform trial, and that you are the only site in upstate New York. And so we're really thrilled, and we're glad that we have this opportunity here in our area for people to participate in clinical research. So our chapter, as a whole, is also dedicating to doing whatever it takes to improve access to multidisciplinary care for all upstate New Yorkers at our multidisciplinary clinics across the state, and to empowering people living with this disease to engage the way they want. And also a big focus for us is to reduce the emotional and the physical and the financial burden of living with ALS. And I just wanted Rebecca to take a couple minutes to explain how we're doing that here.
Okay, thank you so much. Good afternoon. And I'd like to thank Liz for the opportunity to share today about our care services and programs. Our chapter serves 48 counties in upstate New York, and as Liz mentioned earlier, approximately 400 individuals living with ALS and their loved ones in any given year. We've been fortunate to grow our care services staff over the last few years in an effort to better meet the needs of those we serve. Our care services coordinators live and work in the region they are primarily responsible for. Julie Garland in Western New York, Laura Pilo in the Finger Lakes region, Marlene McCleary in Eastern and Northern New York, and I cover the Central New York area. What do? We provide education, information, and referrals through regular phone calls, emails, and home visits. We participate in our local multidisciplinary ALS clinics, where individuals living with this diagnosis receive specialized care, serving as a chapter liaison and patient advocate. We facilitate monthly support groups for individuals living with ALS, their caregivers, and their loved ones. These groups offer an opportunity to explore community resources and to connect with others who understand the unique challenges of living with or caring for someone with ALS. We manage an equipment loan program that provides adaptive equipment and assistive technology needed for everyday living, with the help of community partners, like durable medical equipment companies NewMotion and Sheridan Surgical. We offer financial assistance for ALS-related medical expenses and in-home care not covered by insurance through our reimbursement grant programs. We also consult and collaborate with allied healthcare professionals in the community, such as home health agencies, palliative care, and hospice organizations, to ensure that individual needs are being met. All of these services and programs are offered free of charge. Over the last 14 months in particular, we've worked more closely with each other and our community partners than ever before to ensure that our services and programs remained available, accessible, consistent, and timely. As our community has grown increasingly comfortable with the use of technology and virtual platforms, we've increased our own proficiency, offering virtual home visits, clinic consultations, and support groups. As equipment loan programs similar to ours closed in the wake of the pandemic, we worked with our partners to ensure that loaner equipment needs were still being met while prioritizing the safety of everyone involved. We are so grateful for the skill and the creativity of our collaborators during this time. It's our job to be available to meet people where they're at, to actively listen, field questions, and to gently point them in the right direction, knowing that we can see around the corners they don't know are coming. It's our hope that in working with our chapter, individuals living with ALS and their families receive the information, guidance, and support they need to navigate decision-making and to enjoy together the best possible quality of life. If you or someone you know may benefit from our services and programs, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you for your time.
Okay, so as you can see, we have an amazing team of folks that are all working together in the ALS community to make ALS a more livable disease. Now we have about 20 minutes remaining, so I wanted to get right to our questions, and I will monitor them and kind of throw them where I think they should go, but if you've got something to say, please jump in. So we have first question here we have on the chat is for Dr. Yersak. I am aware that some patients are obtaining the two components of AMX35 through prescription and over the internet. What is your opinion regarding this while the regulatory applications proceed?
Yeah, thank you. I'm aware of that too. We've heard, I've heard from multiple people and from other people and other chapters, and Liz, we've even talked about this a little bit, that this is happening. You know, I'm not a physician, so I never like to give medical advice, but if it was my family, I'd be wary. You don't know what you're getting online. I've heard of people getting things online that are literally a bag of white powder. It could be anything. And so you have to you have to be mindful about what you're receiving may not be what you think you're getting, and or maybe a drug that may be not as regulated. So, but on the other side of the coin, I understand that there's frustration. You want to get this drug as quickly as possible. So I just really encourage you, if you're thinking about doing that, to speak to your doctor and to make a really informed decision. I don't know if Dr. Young has, if you want to comment too, as a physician on the panel, but that's how I feel about it. And honestly, it scares me because I don't want people to take something crazy, then get some really bad side effect that they didn't have to have.
I agree with Dr. Yursak. There's always that concern. We want to make sure that people are safe, that they're getting what they're supposed to be getting. And without the FDA approval, you know, I would be wary of going down that route.
Rebecca, I know that oftentimes patients will talk to you about this, and how do you typically address it when people are talking about what they're reading on the internet or what they're hearing from oftentimes other online forums?
Sure. Again, we usually advise caution, just because you can really put anything on the internet these days, and we at the association are not medical professionals, so we encourage that folks consult with their treating providers to determine whether or not something might be appropriate for their exploration or use. Okay.
Thank you so much. I know, Jill, you addressed this a little, but someone did, they submitted this question ahead of time, so I wanted to make sure that I asked it, which is about Doran and also Neonata, and wondering, you know, when or if this will be available for ALS patients.
Sure, we get this a lot. There's been a lot of confusion around this, and so let me see if I can hopefully set everyone straight. And this is, again, like, there's been so much going on around the internet, people giving anecdotal videos online, and then all these press releases. But the moral of the story is that the data that we've seen, again, this is not unpublished results, the company has not published the results yet, through press releases, is that they have not met their primary secondary endpoints. They do refer in the press release that there is a pre-specified subgroup that may have a benefit, that subgroup still did not meet statistical significance, so that still may be due to chance. And so we are not, and so those are two things you need to think about. The third thing, this happened, which I've never seen before, is the FDA actually wrote a statement around this, and this is not something the FDA normally does, and they said, I'm going to read it here, they said, there's a modest excess in deaths in those treated with Doran, the significance of which is unclear at this time. And so that's unprecedented that the FDA would make that type of statement. And so this is the first time we've heard this potential safety concern, and we have not heard from Brainstorm since then whether this is true or not. So like I said, these results are unpublished. They said they are going to publish these results soon, but until we have a full picture of the published results, I can't make a call of whether this is going to be available to people with ALS. And so unfortunately, we're kind of still in limbo until we see those results. And of course, as a member of the ALS community, we want to see positive results and get this resolved. But as of now, everything is still unpublished. And the last thing is we encourage Brainstorm to publish those results as soon as possible so we can get that full picture, and also to let us know who was in the placebo group versus the experimental drug group, so we can have a better idea of what we've seen online or what we see in these unpublished results, whether this drug actually had an effect or not. So again, I apologize. These questions are so hard, and I know Dr. Young, I'm sure you got these too, and Rebecca, but you can't make a clear call until you get the full published results, which we have not yet seen.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate that. So this one's for Dr. Young. Other than the Healy trial from MGH at Upstate, are there any other clinical trials being held there?
Yes, we're currently activated for the Ibutalas trial or combat trial, and that study is recruiting at the moment. And we are looking at 2 upcoming trials. One is the cytokinetic trial, and the other one is the oral edaravone trial. The dates on those 2 trials are pending at this time, but we anticipate that it's not going to be long. The cytokinetics trial has not recruited at this time, I believe, and the oral edaravone trial may have started already.
Great, great. I also know that the Dent Neurological Institute in Buffalo is also going to be a site for the oral and edaravone, as well. And they're not clinical trials, but I did want to let folks know that at the University of Rochester, Dr. Cree is doing research on applications of patient monitoring measures and monitoring clinical things for patients at home, and how that can relate to research that can be happening at home, so that we can kind of expand research beyond a clinical trial site at a clinic, so that we can bridge some of that gap or that barrier that's imposed by travel so often, for patients to continue participating in clinical trials. Right now it's really limited to standardizing measures and research, but he's really optimistic also that there will be some clinical applications to that, later on. So then another question I have, Dr. Yursak, is there any movement in making it easier for people with ALS to enroll in clinical trials after 2 years after diagnosis, beyond that 2-year point?
This is something we talked about with a lot with our pharma partners, and so they're well aware of this. Is there a lot of movement? Honestly, that I know of, no. And I'm just being completely honest with you for what I've heard so far. One of the things you have to keep in mind is that when a company looks at trial enrollment in their eligibility criteria, they want to make sure that whoever they're enrolling is progressing in a rate at which they could see an effect in the drug. So if you have someone who's a slow progressor, the drug could be, and you're testing a drug, so if you don't see an effect on the drug, it could be either because you're a slow progressor or because the drug is working really well, and there's no way to tell. And so it's a really hard decision, and each company, depending on the drug, is going to make a call based on what the drug's actually doing. That said, the companies are being more thoughtful about understanding what matters most to a person during the trial. So they want to know, and they're designing clinical trial endpoints to best understand, is this actually impacting your life? Like, is this helping you in some way? So, and this is not only important for the pharmaceutical company, but if this drug gets approved, the payers, the insurance companies want to know, is this drug actually helping you? Is your quality of life of you and your family improving? And so they're asking questions around quality of life and caregiver and patient burden. And this is a movement, I think it's been happening the last few years, that I'm continuing to watch and hoping to see expand through our clinical trials. And so they're doing that, and they're also, like Dr. Young said, they're looking at ways to do clinical trials more at home. This happened because of COVID. If anything happened positive because of COVID, this is one of them, is the home spirometry test that Dr. Young's testing, and other ways to get people to do visits for the clinical trials at their home through telemedicine and telehealth. So you don't have to run to the clinic every time. A lot of our patients across the country don't live close to a trial site. So if they can do the initial visit in person and then the majority of the other visits online, I think that's going to be a really positive thing. And some of our trials are already moving towards that, and I'm assuming, and I've been seeing that other companies are also moving in that direction, which is really exciting. So they may not be moving that much with the enrollment of after 2 years. They are doing other things that hopefully improve clinical trials for people with ALS and their families.
Thank you. Thank you.
Do you mind, Liz, if I just add something? This isn't,
Sure.
this doesn't specifically address the opportunity to participate in clinical trials, but there are opportunities to participate in research through the National ALS Registry, which is run by the Centers for Disease Control. That in and of itself is a research project. And so they have been over a number of years collecting data on individuals living with ALS to get a better understanding of ALS as a whole. What's potentially causing it? That data is available to researchers. And so if folks are interested in participating in research but are outside of that window of time where they could be eligible for a clinical trial, and you haven't explored the possibility of completing the surveys through the National ALS Registry, that may be a nice option for you to get involved in some capacity. And then the other thing that I just wanted to mention again is what Dr. Yersak had mentioned briefly in her presentation, which is the opportunity to participate in the focus surveys through the ALS Association, which you will be receiving information about in the coming days through email and on social media, alerting you to those opportunities. So I just wanted to take the opportunity to highlight those two options as well.
Thank you, Rebecca, because I forgot to say that. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. So we have one question on research and funding. So the question is, can we make more research progress with additional funding? And if so, what is the National Association doing to work on developing those additional fundraising strategies beyond the ALS walk?
Do you want me to take that?
Sure, you can take it and then I can jump in.
Okay, great. So yes, more money is key, right? And so I'll give you an anecdote. I used to work in a lab in graduate school. It was during the recession. And I remember at the time, our research grants had got cut. And we slowed down. It happened. We didn't have the money that we needed to buy the supplies I needed to do my experiments. So things slowed. And so money counts. And so I can tell you, and Dr. Dave is not on the phone, but if you were here, he would say, I have a whole list of projects that I want to fund, but I can't do that unless we have the funding. So yes, we're planning on a bunch of new research applications to push out. And the more money we have, the more money we can give out. And that money drives research to be able to not only to buy the supplies I need, like in my case, but also hire the research coordinators and the lab staff to get the work done, because you need the bodies to get the work done. It takes a lot of time and coordination. So that's from my perspective. But Liz, I'm sure you have
Sure. Well, I think one of we all, whether it's at the National Association or if it's here in the local chapters, we all really understand the importance of diversifying our revenue streams. And if anything, what we found with this past year, without being able to hold our events the way that we typically do, really is the importance of, developing and growing, those revenue streams. And so we're really looking at working with individual giving, with major donors, individual donors, perhaps plan gifts, building our relationships with our corporate partners, looking at the family foundations, corporate foundations, really investing in our digital fundraising, whether that's the direct mail program or using social media to raise money via Facebook or other digital platforms. And that's one of for us is the opportunity through social media is that our, for example, Facebook fundraising has grown dramatically over the past couple of years, particularly for example, and it's different in each of our markets. And so we developed different strategies, for our markets. Like in the Buffalo market last year and the year before, over 25% of the money we raised in our walk was through social media. And so really, working on how can we help our fundraisers and our families, really use those platforms, effectively, and how do we support them? And we have a development staff that works very intimately, with our fundraisers, providing the kind of support and help that we need. But it's definitely is a huge focus, going forward. And so again, we really are working on that. See, we've only got a couple of minutes left, but I did want to kind of close with one last question for each of the panelists. And I'll start with Dr. Young. What is one thing you wish everyone knew about ALS?
Tough question. But I go back to 7 years ago when I started down this path. And one thing that I had wished I knew at the time getting into this is the acknowledgement that, yes, ALS is a livable disease. It can be a livable disease. For some, more livable than others. And I think with all this time and investment that the ALS Association has put in, the local community has put in, SUNY Upstate, the ALS clinic has put in, I think this is becoming more and more a reality. And I always go back to the grassroots and the boots on the ground. These are the people that you know. These are the people in your neighborhood, maybe teachers that taught your grandkids or taught you in high school when you were 20 years younger. You know, this is your community. And I feel that if I had known then 7 years ago that all this body of work, you know, is being done not by one or several people, but actually a village, even in the local communities, then I would have been less fearful. And I think fast forward 7 years later, I feel far more confident, you know, that ALS is a livable disease.
Jill, same question. What do you wish was one thing you wish people knew?
Well, there's a couple quick things. So, Dr. Young, I completely agree. We need to focus on the livable piece, right? You know, the more I talk to patients, they want to focus on them living more, and live longer and better lives, not that they're dying. They don't want to think themselves as dying. And, you know, and how can we impact their lives in the best way? And so we've been thinking a lot about, even with coverage, like the decisions they make about their care and the support and services they have shouldn't be based on what their insurance coverage, but what they actually need. And so we're working really hard to pull together a disease journey map about what happens along the disease journey for people to understand what are those decision points, and what are the insurance coverage I need to know about to make the good decisions for your family that are always individualized. Everyone with ALS is different. I guess, and then that leads me into the other piece I want everyone to know, and I wish I knew. You know, everyone with ALS is so unique. I've been in the field for a really long time, and not everyone I've met has had a different journey, right? There's things in common, but it's their own journey that they own, and that when you're with a person with ALS and their family, you have to honor that this is their journey that they're trying to deal with, and they deal in their own way. And so not everyone is going to be proactive, but some people are, you know, and some people aren't. And so it's just such an important thing to understand that, like, people are on their own way and going on their own journey, and that things are they're going to be able to deal with their own way. And how can we as an organization help the individual, not just the full disease?
Rebecca, what's one thing you wish people knew?
I think that the thing that I wish people knew is that though statistically rare or uncommon, once you become aware of ALS, it doesn't feel that way. There is a big, caring ALS community in the world, in the US, and right here in upstate New York. And so I just want folks who are impacted by ALS to know that they are not alone. They have a lot of people in their corner.
Thank you, Rebecca, you couldn't have said it better. I really we're out of time, but I wanted to thank all of our panelists for sharing their insight this afternoon. And I want to thank all of our attendees for taking the time, really to join us. And I hope you found, this presentation informative. We have recorded it. And so if you'd like to see it again, or you want to forward it to somebody else, just let us know, and we will make that happen. I really want to thank you for believing in our mission. Thank you for sharing our vision, and really thank you for supporting us for being of service to the ALS community. We are all working, for that day when ALS no longer threatens the lives of the people that we love, and that there will be treatments and a cure for this disease. And in the meanwhile, we will continually assess how we can better serve and support all of our pals, how we can help them participate, more fully in seeking treatments. And, I will be reaching out to all of you, in the coming days to get feedback on how you think we can better support the ALS community. We are so grateful to have everyone here, with us as we fight ALS today, and we will fight ALS tomorrow, and we will continue fighting it until we end this disease. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.